Are there
Whoa.
are there any students who still need to make up the unit exam at this stage in the game? Good. Update on my wife. Um, most of you doing well. She's like up and at 'em. Um, she's sort of sad. Some hateful.
All the sheets of information. How is on the background?
Go away.
Make sure. If the order on okay. And the parents know what the English language is English. US is to get all of that. As long as you have done that.
How many of you already have the information you need to order your exams? How many of you need information to order AP exams? I have 2 reminders. Please make sure that you put your name when you order, not your parents' name. And please make sure that your parents know which exams you need to order. Apparently there's a lot of confusion right at the end, and we had like 3 students last year that couldn't get the test because their mom and dad ordered the wrong one. Yeah.
Should we buy
Yeah, let me talk about those things tomorrow. That way I can do it with all my other periods. So, as I was saying, my wife is kind of sad because she was supposed to. I told you I think that she had a drain coming out of her where her boob was because of all like the fluid buildup because they like took out all kinds of meat in there, and so there's all these like tissues that don't have plumbing anymore, so there's all this like buildup of juice. And there's like a tube that comes out and goes into like a little collection bag that she has to keep like on a safety pin on her t-shirt. So she'll be standing there like this, and like she's moving around with this like bag of juice. And every day she has to drain it like a few times and measure how much juice. If the juice would cut down, then she could take it out. But I think that's been really discouraging for her. I think that's probably the single greatest discomfort overall has been having that stupid thing, and then they haven't taken it out yet, and she's still like it's still filling up with juice often. So I think she's really frustrated by that, and I think that makes her sad and uncomfortable. And she's really self-conscious around groups of people because she's afraid of like getting bumped into. She lives with me, and I think all of you have noticed that I'm like a body check sort of person. So I think she's probably on her guard more than most people already, and both of my children are like dynamic and explosive. And we have like a small cluttered house, and so it's always like people are always crawling over each other in my house. And so anywhere she goes, I think she feels kind of like vulnerable. Her spirits are generally good. She's stoked. And I can definitely tell you the hardest day in our cancer journey so far. Starting in December, we've known that like, well, you're probably going to need a mastectomy. So you're certainly going to need a mastectomy. And then you might need radiotherapy, and who knows, if it gets really bad, we'll do chemo. And then every time that we've had some results, it's like, okay, so radio and chemo, and they're like, well, we don't know about that yet, but so it was like, we don't know about that yet, we don't know about that yet, we don't know about that yet. And then when she went in for surgery, we were kind of excited because once they like slice off all the meat, then they can chop up all the meat, and then they look at it and they say, okay, now that we got that stuff out, we can tell you radio and chemo. So about a week after the surgery was on a Wednesday, so exactly 7 days later on a Tuesday, they said, all right, we're done chopping up the meat. Good news, you don't need radio, you don't need chemo. You're on the road to recovery. And my wife and I were totally expecting the opposite, that she would need radiotherapy and chemo. So we were like, oh, no way. And so we started, like, I texted everybody I know. My mom, my dad, my brother, all my homies, like all of her homies. Road to recovery, road to recovery, road to recovery, road to recovery. Because that was like the surgeon's quote. And I was like, oh, road to recovery. And then on Wednesday, she calls back and says, oh, never mind. Spoke too soon. You are going to need radio and maybe chemo after all. And we were just like, that was definitely the hardest day. For my wife and probably for me in this whole journey. Yeah. It's like we were expecting that all along, but then to find out, like, oh, we won the lotto, it's over. And then like, nope, never mind, you didn't win the lotto. Like, oh, man. So now we've adjusted to that, and we're back to the original plan. Sometime soon, my wife starts radiotherapy. We still don't know if she'll need chemotherapy. We should find out in the next. We might find out. My whole life. I'm like full-on single parent many days. My wife does like a few things, like she'll handle bath time a couple times. She's rented the kids 2 nights now, but otherwise, like single dad life. Weird. Anybody raised by a single parent? Dude, your single parents deserve such an award. Like, oh my god. Oh my god. I've always heard about that and thought like, yeah, that was really tough. But like, I haven't actually like walked the walk yet. And obviously, I'm not like a total single parent. Like, I still have a living wife who does a lot of stuff. Man. What else? I went fishing. I broke a toe. We're buying a house. I walked into a stump barefoot 2 nights ago. Yeah, I used a piece of wood to keep my trailer for the boat elevated a little bit because my truck is too tall for the trailer. So if I put the trailer down on the wheel, you know, like on the trailer post wheel on the tow wheel thingy that cranks the wheel up the straight, it's too low. My truck's like this, my trailer's like that. And lifting up the tongue of my boat is really difficult. The tongue weight on my boat is, I can kind of get it off the ground, but it's a pretty much like full on deadlift. So I guess like 350 or something. Really, so I keep like a little stump, like a ring that I cut off the tree from there, like under the wheel. And I threw it in the bushes, and I was walking around really late to take a fish for a homie of mine. And I was like full speed, like just like walking, like full momentum. And I got it like right at like high speed, so it broke my little toe. Oh, it looks like really safe stuff. Less. They do? Oh, that's gonna suck. Are they gonna put you off for it? Let me see why. Oh, it's super fine, dude. Is that super fine? Got a custom face. Those are they go work on. That was fine, dude. Really? Is that it's different? And you can tell when you look in the mirror, you like don't feel like you. No. Okay. Yeah. My life. What did I miss around here?
Nothing.
I had all that, and you got nothing.
They didn't do it.
Nobody got stabbed. Nobody got pregnant. Nobody got arrested. So boring. Oh, the arrest. I guess I'm keeping it on the DL for now. Waiting for the first trimester to pass. All right. Well, congratulations on your boring lives. Really nothing? School stuff? Archuleta was cool? I mean, and Katie were cool?
Yeah.
Paperwork shuffle, the videos. Unit 7 exam day, looking at Unit 7 test, keys, playing field appealed. You saw your grades posted on NEO, you saw that announcement. How many of you plan to correct your grades today? If you have grade corrections, you have to give them literally to Katie before the end of this period and before she gets distracted. So if you have grade corrections, make sure that you get them maybe just right now, I guess.
Are you taking something?
Something with Unit 7 was wrong. What you saw in the grade day before yesterday. And remember that those grades that you saw are completely irrelevant. They matter exactly nothing.
Wait, why? Doesn't it say early?
Right, yeah, like your grade will like go up and down through the year, and by the end of the semester, that gets you to a really good average. But right now, you might be like, oh no, or like oh no, like it'll average out. Yeah,
There was an Arroyo Honda a little bit ago.
is that right?
Would that be in a unit that I already missed, or like?
I'm not that fun.
Okay.
You can turn it in anytime.
Okay.
Just make sure you have the date of the event on the paper.
Okay.
Whenever you go to any Arroyo Honda, you gotta have the date of the event on the paper. That's how we line up all the photos to see that it's all the same team. Anybody else? Well, okay, fine. Please read part 2 of your solar house model handout. Or somebody next to you.
That's good.
Okay. As you know, you're going to be testing your solar house models. You gave me some plans a while ago. I have not finished looking through your resubmissions yet. Your solar house models are due in about 3 weeks. And the model takes kind of a lot of work. I want to remind you that you are trying to make it look like your house, but more importantly, you're trying to make it function like your house. The difference between visual modeling and scientific modeling. So, like I told you before, these are all roofs that look green, but the only one that actually works like a green roof is not the one that looks like a green roof on that model, but the part that works like a green roof. It's a sheet of metal to take the temperature of the interior to a wet rag on the surface that evaporates when the air blows across it. Function of a green roof. Like, this is more the color of Adobe, but this one functions like Adobe. Yeah. And in previous years, before I had higher standards for this assignment, students used to bring me their solar houses, and I asked them to leave advice to the students of the future. You are the students of that future. So here's what they suggested for you. And I'll show you their houses and I'll give you some feedback. And you have your notes out because if I were you, there's a few things I would write down. This was not a good house for a whole bunch of reasons. But they had what I consider to be the most fundamental suggestion. They were forced to turn in like a really crappy house, even though they were like a really smart, thoughtful group because they put together all these materials and had like this really ambitious design. And then they couldn't build it because they didn't have like the right tools and didn't really need the right amount of time. I think what they should say is take more time instead of get the appropriate tools. Because I think if they had left themselves more time, they would have gotten the right tools. This is kind of a great example of how it doesn't have to look like your house, it has to work like your house. They had a big, like, fancy pool built into the roof of their house. But then when they got there, that was too difficult to build. So instead, they created a pool-like structure on the top and used tubing to connect the water from the surface to the water inside the house, which kind of would work like having a big pool on the roof of your house that you can see from the bottom of your house, because water gets in, the temperature gets into the water, and then that water has another thing to evaporate and heat. This one also shows you something that I think is interesting. You see that seam in the left-hand corner right there? That's a really big whoop. Imagine what it would be like to control and harness small variations in this classroom's air temperature if I had a 3-inch gap along that seam all the way across the building. You know what I mean, right? Like a 3-inch gap. Proportional to this space is a teeny little seam. But of course, a 3-inch gap, we could never heat or cool this building. It would be outside temperature all the time. You guys realize that? Or like if I opened all these windows, you know, when you look at a lot of the houses, like the fact that that door doesn't really fit, that's sort of like trying to heat your house when you like have the door cracked open. Like, it's not trying to heat your house, bro, your door's open. That little space, proportional to your house, you know? Serena walks by, and that air movement is like a hurricane blowing through your house. really got to build your model to be airtight, or you can't really control temperature inside it. Probably the single biggest weakness, I would say, of all my models all year. And I'll talk later about how you can seal them. The thing about insulating wood I can talk about later too. That part's actually easier than you might think. So kind of a cool model. They had a lot of interesting ideas. But again, about the timing. You see that dome on the surface? When they showed up, it actually looked pretty sturdy. But in walking it around and taking pictures and stuff, it kind of started to collapse. I see that a lot. Kids bring in stuff that hasn't set or dried yet. In case you needed this bit of advice, paper mache takes a little while to dry. I had this house in here for a long time. I replaced it with that other two-story blue roof one. But the thing that these guys did that I was really impressed by is they had like a fairly unique structure and a pretty smart way to support that tower. Most of the house was a disaster and it did not do well and it wasn't well sealed. But they did use little strips of hobbyist balsa wood, which is relatively inexpensive. You can find it at Michael's or Ace Hardware and probably a bunch of other places I haven't thought of. And it's like really, really thin, lightweight wood that you can just cut with like a pocket knife or even scissors sometimes. But the fact that it's kind of square gives you like really good dimensional surfaces. If you have like fancy structures that you can't figure out how to actually model, it's a pretty good way to make like neat looking, still functional structural support, not functional. A, your trees don't have to look like trees. B, you don't have to glue them into your house. You can see that none of those have trees. C, if you're going to use them, please don't put them on the wrong side of the house. And D, that's a perfect example. This looks nothing like a tree. But if this is my solar house model and that's my light source, it's functioning just like a tree. So when I build your trees, I'm going to take a laminated sheet of paper, I'm going to stick it onto a little piece of cardboard duct taped to a base, and that'll be the tree for your house. A, you don't need to bring it. B, remember that function versus what it looks like then. Two good bits of advice. Sealing the house with a hot glue and starting early. Kind of a fancy design. This was one of the first students to really start sealing the exterior really carefully. This was Mr. Gamble's son. You all know Mr. Lawrence Gamble, the teacher at the high school? This was his son, Ian. Really good kid. He went to Stanford, which I think his father's really proud of. Does anybody have a house built into a hillside? You know houses built into hillsides? I'll skip that advice for your period. Oh, those are actually, that's sarcasm, by the way. I don't even talk about that house, but that's 100% sarcasm. No cardboard, no super glue. They were messing with you. No cardboard, no super glue. So, two different bits of advice. One of them is, you're going to test the winter first. So in winter, you close your windows. Your trees lose their leaves. But in the summer, your trees leaf out and you open your windows to get rid of heat. Does everybody realize that in the summer you open your windows? So you're going to build your house for winter with the windows closed. And then after you do the winter test, you will open the windows and do the summer test. The window that I like the best, honestly, is just packing tape. Because it lets in plenty of light, it seals up pretty much airtight. And you can either open it, or you can technically just cut it out with like a little razor blade or my knife or something. How many of you have double insulated or double glazed windows? If you do double glazed windows, key bit of advice, before you put on the roof, make a layer of tape on the interior wall, and then take a couple of toothpicks add them to one layer of tape and put that over the inside one. Those toothpicks will maintain a little air gap. You know what I mean by that? Those of you who made double glazed windows, you might know that the whole idea is there's a body of trapped air between those two sheets of glass. So it's really difficult for temperature on the outside to affect temperature on the inside because there's air in the middle and air has really low heat capacity. So to maintain that air pocket, use those toothpicks. If not, the two pieces of tape get stuck together, and you might as well not have double glazed windows. Yeah, bro.
The water filter starts to go red, just so you know.
Not to me, but I'll pass it on to people who probably would care. Thank you. These kids, though, look up here. First of all, they used dabs of hot glue in between the two layers so that they wouldn't stick together. And then second, yes, dabs of hot glue. Works the same way. And then, right there, magnets. To open their windows. I was blown away. I kept out here for like 3 years because you could like take off the magnets, put it back on. Rad window. Oh! Don't die, it's too soon.
Wait, why do you want bubble wrap in 2 miles?
It was their idea for insulation. Actually, I wouldn't recommend it. If you've ever seen like surfboard bags that have like that double-sided Mylar bubble wrap stuff, anybody seen that on surfboard bags? So those usually have a layer of bubble wrap plus another layer of bubble wrap, and technically there would be like bubbles on this side and bubbles on that side that kind of fit together. So there's always like bubble anywhere you touch. That's fine. If you have like double-sided bubble wrap, that's okay. But the single-sided bubble wrap that you'll often see for like pottery in a bottle or something, where it's like plastic with these like blisters of air, that makes bad insulation. Because between the air blisters, there's a very thin layer that does not insulate. Does that make sense to everybody? So I don't really recommend bubble wrap unless you can get the double-sided one. Oh my God, these kids tried so hard to keep their green roof alive. This was the day they showed up, and they were all crying because it had already died overnight in their trunk. But for the next like 6 weeks, they were like so dedicated to keeping it alive. First, they didn't water it enough. Then there was like a long weekend. Then we had like a problem setting up the testing thing, so it kept taking forever. And by the time it had completely died, they thought to bring it back, they should water it more. So instead of like trying to like keep the water to a minimum, they just like dumped water on it. The whole thing collapsed and turned into a pile of muddy cardboard. No green roof using real plants. Coincidentally, the physics of the modeling scale, it doesn't work anyway. Wet rag works great, especially if it's on a conductive layer. These kids got it kind of right. They got a conductive layer, good call, but they put it on top of an insulating layer, bad call. The temperature of the house has to reach the water, but that's foam board, which is insulation. You know what I'm saying? So what you should do is under the metal, have a cutout in the ceiling so that the interior temperature can be cooled off by the evaporation of water. Yes? You didn't want to ask me something that was slightly wordy. How many people like this sound? A little RJBQ for you.
Oh my God.
Okay. Too much detail can be a problem. A lot of kids made like some rad designs, and then when they tried to make it in the mall, they were like, "Oh God, that was such a bad call." These kids spent like a month on it. It was a disaster. This one looks really fugly, but it worked awesome. That little wooden frame holds a layer of concrete that they poured for their foundation. Great foundation, concrete, spectacular. Like, if you want your house to work, just spend the next 3 weeks learning how to use concrete and new stuff. I'm telling everybody straight up, like the secret of this assignment, so you don't have to write the essay at the end. Like your lab report says, our design worked great, period. But you gotta learn how to work concrete. These kids, they made a foundation out of concrete, they made the walls out of like fiberboard or something, then they sealed it really well, and then they painted it. And then that thing with the water on top actually did work really, really well for thermal mass. Heat gain, awesome. They could put a wet rag on top for evaporative cooling.
What's on top?
Those are 3 Ziploc bags of water. If you look underneath, there's like cutouts in the ceiling. So those Ziploc bags were like thermal mass, and then they would just put a wet rag on top of that. So the water would like moderate and then like cool off with the evaporation on the wet rag. It was super successful. Oh my God, don't cut a basketball in half. That's bad mojo. You'll hurt yourself playing basketball someday. You've seen that house already. It's on the side over there. Don't use clay. I'll explain more. Don't use clay. Like these poor kids.
Why is there a PPO cover?
Their design was a dropped ice cream cone.
Oh,
So like their 3-dimensional color street view was like a dropped ice cream cone made into a house. And it was actually like a really ambitious design that had everything incorporated, and like they went for it. They were a pack of mad girls. There were 3 of them. And as sometimes happens in the Mad Academy, they'd known each other since like they were sperm or something. And they spent a lot of time working on this. And it was all made out of clay because they couldn't figure out how to get like thermal mass into that shape. So they walked in like, it was really heavy. They walked in like 2 of them and the third one kind of hovering. And they put it down and they took the photograph outside. And they lift it up and they start to walk inside. And the girl walking backward tripped and hit her heel on the threshold. And she caught herself. But in the swinging, they like slammed the house into the 2 sides of the door jamb. They're like, oh, got it, okay. And then the girl's like, oh, and like everybody was clapping for them. And the house went, and it just literally just like collapsed under its own weight. And I've never seen a more vicious attack by ex-friends in my entire life. Like all the bad things that they had to say about each other after knowing each other for 15 years all came out right there, like publicly. And I was like, oh, I need to unhear that. Like it was so bad. It was so bad.
Yeah.
One of your sisters might have been in that class. I don't think. What was Rosie's older sister? Rose and something. It's been a long time. It probably would have been your older sister. Okay.
Alright, these are all done.
That's right. You need to keep them outside until the rooms are all set. You let them all in the class and I give you questions from them. No problem. Like, I've never seen a more vicious, like, the stuff that they talked about was like, literally stuff that I would be embarrassed to repeat.
No, it's so
You have to repeat. You have to.
What? Did I have what? I can't hear you, I'm sorry. Sorry, Tim, I didn't hear what you said. Okay. It was, you changed your mind about saying it. Once you say it, you kind of need to unsay it. They were like, really like personal and like,
But like detail.
stuff about their bodies and sex lives and like their secrets and like, I've never seen people go at each other like that verbally in my whole life. Like one of the girls was like crying and like, I just like chuckled and like watched. I mean, I told him to kick back and I tried to mellow things out, but like, yeah, what am I gonna do? Like seriously, like I mean, nobody was punching each other and like I don't know, they kind of were handling their business. Like I don't know. At first, it was hilarious.
Like one of the girls was like, oh, you're
So much worse.
What?
So much worse. I'm not gonna. Everything you should not do. Everything you should not do. Not duct tape. Not sand. Not cardboard. Don't use any of those things. No loose sand. No duct tape. No cardboard. Behind the screen, they were trying to hold it all together. This became a pile of mud. This was surprisingly effective. That greenhouse on the side that's shaped like a dome, with just some bent wires and like those clear cellophane bags that you use for vegetables at the grocery store. Actually works really well for thermal gain. This was more of that same clay, I think. You know, do you guys all know that I lived in a dome? So, you don't know that I lived in a dome? We haven't talked about this. What? I don't think I've seen that. Oh, not that giant. You guys have not seen my dome? It's similar to a yurt, but it's geodesic. On West Camino Cielo? Yeah, I lived there for like 12 years. I built that. Yeah, my children were born there. Man, this is such a big part of my past. I don't know if we have enough time to just like.
Yeah.
I have plans. Oh right, there's nothing going on Thursdays. If we get through some study goals today, I'll come back to the dome. And someday you should ask me when we have time. It's like it's my greatest labor of love in my life. And we were forced to sell it, and it's probably my greatest regret. I think it was the right move. I don't regret it. I just.
Like, why was living in a dome so awesome?
A, there's no corners. B, you can like hear the wind, and being in the rain inside of a 1,000 square foot dome is like. It kind of had like some divided spaces, but the only thing that was kind of like a roof was the laundry. Oh, stainless steel and like a really fancy part. Maybe aluminum. Yeah, two for aluminum and like regular frame post beams, always construction on the interior, the loft and staircase.
The loft.
Canvas is what they call truck tarp. Yeah, kind of extreme temperature variations. Yeah. Someday I'll tell you about that. Anyway, because I built a dome, and for many years that was like my primary focus before my children were born. Everything I had going on was something to do with the dome. So all my kids were like hearing about the dome every day. So they all made like dome-inspired structures. No, it's not. That clay, they were really excited because they were able to model it. Within days, it started to dry and crack and fall apart. It became dust before they could test it. Another dome disaster. That was also a last-minute job. But they got They got a lot of things right. My dome had a separate bathroom that was outside, like a little square. So they actually got the geometry of my concept right. There's like a dome and then the bathroom was outside. What? Oh, that's a leaf.
The thing's like made to scale.
Oh my God. Don't do that. Everybody knows what foam core is. The paper with foam and paper that people use for posters, kind of rigid. That's like a really good way to model like your modern California ranch house construction. You know, you have like drywall, insulation, and stucco. That actually is pretty darn close to scale to foam core. So now, like this guy, pretty darn close to the same thing. I can't stop looking at your nose. It looks totally normal. You realize that normal?
Yeah. No.
Oh, disaster. Kind of rad. They had a tree growing through a house floating on water. But it had thermal mass. So they got a cookie sheet, used a round concrete foundation, filled the cookie sheet with water. So water moderating the thermal mass temperature of the foundation. Actually worked really well, except that they cut themselves on the roof. Now you're not allowed to use reflective materials, but they were surprised to note that metal is hard to cut. Priceless advice for you. Oh my God. Oh, Adobe. How many of you have Adobe? Nobody Adobe? Fine.
Tell us the horror story.
No, this was a great success story. It was such a great success that they wouldn't leave it with me. Then I took it home. Kept it. I was like, oh, dude, that's so amazing. Great job. You guys did it. You solved the puzzle with making it out of Adobe. You want to leave it for the class? And they're like, taking it home. Oh, wait, really? You can take it. Bring it home. So I know, it's like on the fridge somewhere. Oh my God. That was pretty good. It's over there. Oh my God. The worst solar house model ever. The worst. Number one, the worst. Literally everything you shouldn't do, like aluminum foil, like a dead stick. The foundation's wobbly. They use like a scrap of wood and like two like sawed-off rings of a poster tube that weren't even straight-sided, so the thing was wobbly anyways. And like for thermal mass, they just went out in the yard and got some dirt wet, like stuck it on the cardboard, and it all just, fell off, obviously. I've never seen a more disappointing work submission in my entire academic life. This was the most like crap my pants homework assignment I've ever seen. Like, Evelyn?
What are we supposed to use for the conductive layer if not?
Tell me more what you mean.
Like on that model, what are we supposed to use for the conductive layer for the greenhouse?
The reason you don't use metal is it's reflective, so you can't have a reflective surface. If it's not reflective, you're allowed to use metal. Separately, the easiest to manipulate that I've seen is like semi-disposable like pie tins. Have you seen the like the takeout turkey trays? You know, like the throwaway turkey trays. It's like aluminum, but it's pretty sturdy. That's like moldable, but you can cut it with scissors.
If you were to paint on metal, would it still have the same properties?
It would still have the same physical properties except for the light properties, yeah. Oh, whatever. Just a few reminders and then we'll wrap it up. Also, give me a second to smash Connor's phone against his face. Reminder number 1, your inside square footage should be 1 square foot. If you have 2 stories, that adds up to half and a half makes 1 square foot. And no, I don't actually take out calipers and do the math and get it exactly right. But you know, these are all roughly 144 square inches or so. If you're within a few percent, that's fine. I'll be convinced. But you don't want to make like gigantor houses and teeny houses. You're right around a square foot. Also, please don't make your foundation giant, but your house small. Make your landscape just barely bigger than the house. We don't have the space. Like I've had kids bring in like a half sheet of plywood with a little house on it. Just cut a piece of plywood. Yeah?
What if you have a lot?
That would count as inside footage, but you know, if it's not that functional to the life of your house, you could just fail to model it. Also, students, remember that if your house is built to scale, a square foot house shouldn't be a foot tall. That's a 3.5 story house. So if your house is a square foot, a single story is about 4 inches. And that actually does affect your dynamics. It's a waste of time to make super tall houses. Anybody have any other questions for me about this? We got the evaporative cooling, foundation, square footage, metals. Yeah, exactly. That's like a 4-story pyramid. Yeah. And they were trying to make it a 2-story, so they weren't that far off. What else? Last call.
So we should start them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you some bits of advice. The best foundations, if you're just doing a square foot, is a nice thick tile. No, but it has good thermal mass, and most people have thermal mass on the floor. So it's a really good, sturdy, easy to use, good thermal mass option. Just make sure it's like a ceramic terracotta concrete tile, not plastic. Yeah. We'll have to find a time. We got to plan one, so your time is ticking in the meantime. You're still able to get credit, but you're running up against deadline after deadline here. Right. Yeah.
When do we see our review kind of thing?
I'm sorry that I couldn't do it this last weekend when I thought I would. I think it's going to have to be this weekend. I'm going to be on campus for sure many hours on Saturday, so I think I'll do it then. Yeah.
My opening day is on Saturday. I'm going to take your on Saturday. I can't figure out how to get rid of my issues.
The big dirty secret is if you don't show, you can lie about why you didn't show, and usually they will roll over your price to the next date. The 1-800 number on your registration ticket. You can say, oh, I woke up with a killer migraine, or have horrifying diarrhea, or I just woke up and drunk or whatever. And normally, unless you're clearly at fault, they roll over. There's also neighbors.
It's the weekend in the middle of the week.
I have all the dates on those papers in the back, so if you have the class, it's literally out right now. Any other questions? Take out your 9.2, get ready to take notes. Unit 9 is probably the most note-intensive unit of the year. I will explain. All right. So, in my experience, year after year of doing the same content, this is the most sciencey unit of the year. If you're really, really, really good with chemistry and physics and earth sciences, you might consider this to be about normal. But for everybody else, when I get to the end of the year and I ask all my students, what was the hardest for you? They all say this one. And the good news is I've been doing this for like a decade. Trust me, like, we're gonna get all the right info, it's all set, the unit's organized properly. Climate is like a really big issue for me because you know I'm political and climate change has been totally politicized and de-scientized. So this unit for me is like really interesting and I'm super into it. And I can do both the political conversation in parallel with the science conversation. You're gonna be totally fine, except you really, 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 really need notes in order. And as a matter of fact, could we break the video and then start it again right away? Just stop and start so that there's